Opposed, nay. Okay, all right, thank you. Item 3, chairperson's report. Last week, Thursday afternoon and Friday, we met as a SHAC, the State Community Health Services Advisory Committee in St. Cloud. And the gist of the meeting, and Karen Sanis was in attendance too, was, and I struggle with this, it's the transformation of public health. Now, is it transformation or change? And if you look up in Webster's dictionary, they kind of mean the same thing, but they kind of don't mean the same thing. So everybody's kind of struggling with what transformation means. But they found through the pandemic and the health situations of the last couple of years that things need to change. One big thing is the state legislature recommended or recognize some of that change by giving more funding. A big part of how public health works is with the state giving money to the locals, but there's a real need to ask the state to be sure and fund the foundational capacity of each and every community. And then if there's special things that a community wants to do in regards to health, and one thing that came up was a couple counties do a foot clinic. And I can identify with that. My mother needed help trimming her feet and taking care of her feet, and she had to wait for somebody to come to the assisted living every 6 months or so. So they do a foot clinic. So the whole idea is to get the state and the federal government to fund the baseline, the foundational things through probably a formula yet to be determined. And then if a community feels a need for something specific for the community, then local dollars would probably take care of that special program. And of course, the Commissioner of Health was there. And it's always interesting. And she even said it, the public health budget is a rounding error in the human service budget. I mean, it's really a very small portion of any budget federally and state and everything. So it's something that needs to be done. And Minnesota, we had people there from the state of Washington, and they've been going through this process for about the last 10 years trying to change things, and it's a slow process. But Minnesota is one of the unique ones that we have the state and the local partnership. There's no other committee that we serve on where we get the commissioner there and their staff to partake in planning and implementing programs. So a big thing is they're looking for, more direct funding, statewide systems, and looking to ask the legislators to support a funding transformation. And they have done that. They allocated, was it Karen, help me out. Was it 7-something million extra in planning and moving forward? And Karen, your comments on the commissioner's remarks and the meeting.
Yes, and it is a big ask for public health. It's about $7 million that they're asking in additional funding to be able to just for planning and to get a pathways to our transformation or change that we need within our public health system. Majority of it is around infrastructure. And I think we've noticed that here in Winona County. And again, like Commissioner Ward said, really looking at getting funding through the local public health grant through the state of Minnesota and the federal government to fund those foundational key statutorily required services like disease prevention and control, maternal child health, those different types of things that is within statute 145A.
Right.
Yes.
So we'll be working on that, and they're working on, and one of the other big items is the trust in public health, and how do we message to the public the good things that public health needs to do and does, and moving forward. And so communications people are working on some key things. They're gonna, it's like anything, you need to brand it. And I interestingly enough, put this jacket on this morning, and we have this little pin, and it kind of shows the city to the rural. And this was a brand from probably 15 years ago. And I don't know if they'll incorporate that again, but covering all aspects of Minnesota people.
Well, and making the funding equitable across the state is what we have always struggled with, not just in public health, in human services. A county of 50,000 versus a county like Hennepin, and our needs are different, but And we all have same similarities. And again, funding the foundational services that are required of
Right.
public health.
And interesting you bring that up. So a friend of mine is from the very far northwest corner of the state of Minnesota, and they have like 1.3 public health FTEs, but they're mandated to do the same programming and everything. Of course, they only have, I think, 5,000 population, but it's it's proportional. They have to do the same things
Mhm.
that the Hennepins do, but with, much less staff and much less dollars.
Yes.
And it's equity. Does the people in far northwest Minnesota deserve the same public health programs and services as the people in Hennepin? Of course they do, but it's a matter of how do we do that?
Correct. Yeah. The people in, I believe you're referring to Kitson County.
Yeah, Kitson. Yes.
So, yeah, Kitson County, they're Kitson County, even though they're 6,000 individuals and we're 50,000, they're still required to write the same 11 public health emergency preparedness plans. And you still have to write those, and you have to do it with a 0.3 versus a 0.6 in Winona. It's just, yeah. So we are really, really struggling with some of the formulas that have been established and really looking at for equitable funding across the state.
Right.
So,
And even one large Stearns, which is St. Cloud area, the one director says, yeah, I spend, hours and hours filling out applications and paperwork for a nickel's worth of funding.
yeah, I think that Melissa Huberty said she had 399 contracts with the Minnesota Department of Health, and all were worth $5.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, it's sarcasm at its best, but I mean, it is true. We do spend a lot of time working through contracts with the Minnesota Department of Health because of how our funding is compared to the Minnesota Department of Human Services.
Right. So we'd like the base and not have to fill out all these paperworks and everything and such. So that'll be an ongoing process and everything. And of course, Commissioner Malcolm reminded us all that we have an election coming up, and she is an appointed person. That may stay the same, it may change. And when in the flux of all our key commissioners in all our state agencies may or not. And then that always leads to transformation because they come in with different thoughts, concepts, and priorities. So
And one thing I learned about Commissioner Malcolm, I did not know that she was the Commissioner of Health under Jesse Ventura's administration.
Yeah, she was a Jeffrey appointee. So,
one fun fact about Commissioner Malcolm.
Yeah, and then Ventura, and was it Plenty? And then
Yes.
Plenty, and then now Walls. So yeah. Not to say that she's been around, but she's been around.
Yes,
and
she knows her
good,
stuff.
A good stable force in public health.
Sure.
So, okay, so that's what we did last Thursday and Friday morning. Thank you. Being no consent business, let's see, Karen, can you send us through 5.1, approve Minnesota Department of Health Community Health Board grant project agreement for state health improvement partnership. And that's actually page 72 of our agenda packet. And it's just it's basically an extension with funding.
Yes, we've already approved the contract for the 5-year plan. This is just funding 4 years, 3, 4, and 5 that will be it'll just draw down the dollars to the county, and we need approval on it for the state health improvement project.
Move approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson to approve the contract with the Minnesota Department of Health grant project agreement for the state health improvement partnership. Any discussion? Commissioner Jacob.
Yeah, I just want to verify that there's adequate staffing. It doesn't put extra burden on the staff that it comes with. The funds come with adequate funding for staffing.
Yes, the SHIP funds, we are able to fund a 1 full-time FTE with benefits. And the funding does come from the state of Minnesota for that.
Extending the burden on staff.
No, it is not.
Right, and in the past, we've done good things for the community, schools, park, recreation.
Yeah. Pays for a community health needs assessment, just really some really good things.
Right, okay, all right. All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed nay. All right, and any other business to come before the health board?
May I?
Yes,
I just had a request for a future community health board. And it came from a recommendation from our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee for me to look at the structure of our community health board. We have a unique situation where our community health board is actually our county commissioners. And I've been asked under the advisory of our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee to relook at that structure and just to put it on for a future general discussion on a community health board.
okay. And we can do that. And I also, with our meeting last week with other agencies, I think we need to look at our whole advisory committee structures. So
Yes,
thank you.
I agree.
Yes. Expertise. Many of the counties on their community service advisory committees have specific positions for expertise in that area. And sometimes we willingly take all volunteers, but sometimes we should maybe reserve a spot for a particular category of participation. So
Yes, I think our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee they really want to focus on the children. They really want to focus on the children and more of that tertiary services as far as foster care, things like that. And I think we really need to relook at our prevention in that continuum of care and really start looking at that prevention piece, because ultimately that will impact the well-being of kids in our system. So.
like public health tends to be more prevention. Human services tends to be, in a very broad term, more reactionary.
Correct.
And so we want to encourage that prevention. All right. Anything else before the Public Health Board?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Olson to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. All right. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We start our meetings with a public comment period. If there are folks in the audience that would like to share some thoughts with us, you have 2 minutes. Please try to keep your comments to the 2 minutes. Please just step forward to the podium, say your name and address for us for the record, and then go ahead and start your comments.
Good morning, Commissioners. Doug Nopar, 29440 County Road 17, Winona. In the wake of the city giving up on its proposal to move the police fire to the East End Rec Center, it appears there's some interest in the city staying at the LEC. And before the city imposes something on another neighborhood, I wanted to ask you as commissioners and county attorney and sheriff's department to reach out to them soon in the name of efficiency, in the name of intergovernment cooperation, in the name of the least community disruption, and at tremendous cost savings for the taxpayer. So I hope you'll reach out to them soon before they line something else up. I hope you'll make it financially affordable for them and accommodate them, perhaps not all the police department's dreams, but at least their needs. So it's a really good chance to do something good. So thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning. Katie Mueller-Freitag, 26743 County Road 15 in Winona. 2 comments this morning. First, I live rurally and found the virtual option for public comment really helpful, especially as weather gets kind of nasty. It's hard to make it to town all the time. So in planning to make a public comment today, I was unable to find the virtual option on the county's website. And as one of the board's stated visions is for broad public participation, I would advocate for reinstating the virtual public comment. Maybe you haven't gotten rid of it, but I didn't see it on the website. And then also I'd like to echo what Doug just said. to encourage commissioners to reach out to city officials for the purpose of discussing space utilization at the current law enforcement center. As you may know, the city is planning to invest in a space for the police department. And a serious discussion between the two branches of government on how to maintain the current space at the LEC has not happened yet, to my knowledge. So I ask that you please consider the idea on how to make it economically and logistically feasible to save taxpayers' money and keep the blueprint, or excuse me, the boot print of the police where they are. Thank you.
Before we go in, it's the virtual is showing up on my, it's showing up on my computer screen. So I don't think we eliminated it. Maybe it's just a technical glitch or something.
Right there.
Yeah.
It used to be available on the agenda at the top of it. It might just be for transparency purposes, helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Mary Jo Klinker. I live at 156 East Broadway, and I'm here to echo what Doug and Katie have already said, which is it would be really wonderful if our county leaders could meet with the city and begin transparent conversations about asking the city to remain where they are. We have asked that of the city manager multiple times and have seen no evidence that that conversation has happened. And it would be great to see these two different governance work together to make sure that it's in the best interest of the people. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Jerry Wolf, and I'm from Spring Valley, Minnesota. And I was asked to work with Darren Engler on a cast vote record and speak to you. May I hand you a handout? So the cast vote record is I have an explanation here on your you're welcome. It's a comma separated list used for recording activity, and analysts can use it on the election system for replaying an election as it goes through. And I worked with our county attorney in Fillmore County, Christy Smith, and was able to work with her to get the cast vote record for Fillmore County and do an analysis on it. And it doesn't have any, it contains the records of how people voted. It doesn't have any personally identifiable information in it, PII. It just shows how ballots were cast in the order that they were cast in. And they can be used for analyzing an election and look for anomalies on how voting trends and voting patterns happen. At first, when I started working with them, with the county auditor, they were a little hesitant, and they were advised by other officials to not give it to us. But one of the things that I'd mentioned to them is as a public record, and it's useful for being able to go through and do an analysis for myself. Similarly, like when I go to my bank and ask for a statement, only in the 20 years that I worked in my local bank, there was only twice where I found a deposit missing. But then I just went to the bank and asked them to look into it, and there was no problem. And same with my bank statement, or they might not send me a bank statement, and I just ask them to give it to me. And I'm not looking for fraudulent activity on bank. I just want to analyze it myself. And similarly with a cast vote record, that would be a similar situation there. It's not that you expect something to be wrong. It's just that you want to validate it yourself. Thank you.
Linda Johnson, 32530 Bobcat Road, La Crescent. Good morning. I'd like to thank you all for being willing to listen with an open mind to our concerns about election integrity. As I've brought up before, one way to help ensure transparency in our election is to make sure the cast vote record is turned on every machine in the county. Now, I know one of the concerns at the last board meeting was you were told as a board you do not have the authority to request the CVRs be turned on. Well, I'm here to tell you, do you know that as a county board, you not only have the option to write a resolution to turn on the CVRs, but you have the option to remove all the electronic voting systems from all the precincts in this entire county if you wanted to. The following Minnesota statute addresses the power of funding or defunding election equipment. Minnesota Statute 373.01 Subdivision 3, entitled Powers, states that each county is a body politic and corporate and may, by resolution and without referendum, issue capital notes subject to the county debt limit to purchase capital equipment useful for county purposes. And it goes on to say, for purposes of this subdivision, capital equipment means complete hardware and software, whether bundled with machinery or equipment, or for training, and it goes on. In addition, Minnesota State Statute 206.58 Subdivision 3 states, the governing body of a county may provide for the use of an electronic voting system in one or more precincts of the county in all elections. The governing body of the municipality shall give approval before an electronic voting system may be adopted or used in a municipality under the authority of this section. Therefore, as the governing body of this county, you do have the authority to pass a resolution to ensure all the VCRs are on. We, the people, want accountability, transparency, and trust. We want to know our elections are transparent and our vote counts. You can be the leaders in election reform and integrity. You can make a resolution to have the CVRs turned on in the upcoming November elections. You do have the power. Thank you for your service.
Richard Dahl, 1167 West Fifth Street in Winona. I've been an election judge for the last 3 to 4 elections. I forget exactly. One of my outstanding experiences has been the excellent training that the auditor and the city clerk have provided. And I am so impressed with the careful attention to not sway people. We have representatives of both major parties in every decision that is made. I think the election system as it is run in Winona County, that's all I'm familiar with, is extremely fair and extremely honest and does not need any further adjustments. Now, I do know the little that I know about this proposed change is that it would record the votes in order and maybe even the time at which they're cast. And I think this undermines the privacy of voting, that all a person has to do is be in a polling place and see who comes in what order. I mean, the election judges see that, and sometimes obviously, I hope there will be great voter turnout in our midterm election, but in some of the others, one person comes in at 9 o'clock, somebody else 20 minutes later. And so if there's a recording through this, whatever is proposed be turned on, people will know who voted or who they, maybe they don't know who voted, but they'll know who they voted for. And if you know who the people were, you would know who they voted for. And I think, therefore, this proposal will undermine the secrecy of the private ballot, which I think is very crucial. Thank you.
So we have, normally our agenda leaves 10 minutes for public comment, and I think we've used that, but it's at the board's discretion to continue public comment. Is that the will of the board?
Yes, I
Yeah.
would.
Great. So please step forward.
My name is Rodney Pulowski. I live at 1289 Windcrest. Thank you for your time. I'll be extremely brief. The most sacred duty I have as an American is to vote. The most sacred duty you have is to count that vote. We look to you. We trust you. We need to trust you. 2016, lots of questions. 2020, lots of questions. We don't need that again. We need to make sure that everybody is confident in our election. It's really not that hard. And it's, if somebody really wants to find out who somebody's voting for, generally you can drive past their house and look at their yard because they have a sign, or they're registered in a party and it's not too hard to see, you know. Nowadays, quite often you can see it on people's heads with their hats. So not a big mystery, but thank you very much for your time.
Steve Holm, 28527 Highway 74, St. Charles, Minnesota. Hearing this proposal to turn the CVR on is disconcerting because, again, it implies that there's no trust in the election officials that are working there. We have Democrats, we have Republicans working side by side. Every ballot is counted. It's audited at the end. The tally sheets are signed. There really is no reason to go through and figure out at what time who voted or who they voted for. This tape shows the total of the votes that have come through, and the ballots do confirm that that's the number that's come through. There shouldn't be a fraudulent activity because of the fact that we're looking at both a Democrat and Republicans working side by side throughout this. So I would highly recommend anybody that does not have faith in the voting system, maybe take some courses on becoming an election official and see what it all involves. And it might help them better understand what goes on in the actual voting process and make them more comfortable with the process itself.
Karen Worthley, 1010 Gilmore Valley Road. I would like to speak to this issue from the perspective of the people I vote for. We vote for people that we feel confident will do a good job. When we elect someone, we should let them do their job. The job of the county auditors in all of our areas is to know, first of all the rules, all the laws, and then to go forward with those in the election. This is not an easy job. There's a lot that you have to know. You also have to balance right in between. And I firmly believe that this is a decision not to be made by you. I know you're good people, but this is a decision to be made by the person that we have elected to make these decisions. Who knows? I'm concerned about small, very small voting places where people could easily be identified without their names. So I don't think this is your job. I think this is a job of the person we have elected to do the job and will be electing. Thank you.
Chastity Siraki, 1254 West 3rd Street in Winona. Those of us who are advocating for the county to confirm that our election machines are enabled to generate cast vote records and to produce those records when requested by the public are in no way saying that Ms. Sukla or anyone in the auditor treasurer's office are guilty of any wrongdoing. We have no reason to believe that anyone in that office has any ill intent when it comes to our elections, and we are not saying that anyone is doing a bad job. We simply want the ability for the public to have access to their complete voting records to ensure the accuracy of our vote counts. There are many possible points of failure or manipulation in the chain of custody of a vote. From the hand of the voter to the Secretary of State's office, there are many steps in the recording and transferring of a vote. Every machine, thumb drive, and person are points in which a vote may be inaccurately counted. Despite what some may think, Electronic tabulators, election computers, thumb drives, and most especially the internet are not infallible and immune to security issues. Software is installed and updated on all election equipment that the county uses. Software can be manipulated in such a way with algorithms to calculate votes in ways other than was intended by the voter. In the final step of getting our votes to the Secretary of State's office, the auditor treasurer sends our tallies over the internet. We all know the vulnerabilities of any information that is put out there via the internet. We all know the vulnerability, at any point in this process, our vote counts can be changed. This can lead to discrepancies between the numbers that Winona County has and what the Secretary of State shows. As the governing body in charge of the election equipment for Winona County, we are asking that you please ensure the capability of the machines to generate cast vote records and the capacity of our county offices to produce those reports when requested. The people's ability to analyze our records is the ultimate safeguard to our election security and accuracy. Thank you.
Good morning. Joe Schlickenmeyer, St. Charles, 1242 Morse Avenue. And I'd like to basically talk about the harassment that is going on in our country generally. And if people can get data mining companies to collect information from people that may be watching the polls and the information that comes out of this particular casting system, they can bring that data together and decide who voted for whom, especially in our precincts that have a lower number of people voting. Then those people can be targeted for harassing type phone calls and problems in our society. And I believe that turning that on will increase problems in our divisions in our country rather than allow us to heal this country and move forward. I have firm trust in our voting system, the way we vote in Minnesota. The way other people vote in other states, I don't have any knowledge, but I have voted, I'm 73 years old, I voted in every single election, and I have trust in our voting system. And I think by giving that information out, it will provide additional information for those people who might want to try to harass and encourage people to not either vote or change the way they look at their vote. So thank you very much.
Darren Engler, 29143 County Road 12. One thing I want to say by starting is some of the stuff I've heard here today is some misinformation on CVRs. So I think it's due diligence for you all to check into what has been stated up here today. I'm standing here to request that you turn on the CVR option on all Winona County voting machines. I know some people think this is an effort by sore losers of the 2020 election to grasp at anything to justify their loss. It is not. This is something that should concern every legal American voter. Many service members have died in the line of protecting our freedom and right to a fair vote. Every one of us should be respecting all men and women that have served this great country. Democrats and Republicans have been concerned about election integrity over the last few years. Republicans over the 2020 election and Democrats over the 2016 election. Going back as early as the 2016 election, you can see many Democrats confirming election fraud. HBO put out a documentary called Kill Chain. If you haven't seen it, I would strongly suggest you do. Our own Minnesotan Amy Klobuchar was among those in this film speaking on her knowledge of election interference. If you feel these electronic machines are safe from hacking, I ask you to look at any other digital platform in your world. Banks, emails, social media, Even our military gets hacked. Big tech gets hacked. And thumb drives can be a source of a nefarious code unbeknownst to the user. Ask any IT professional if they believe there is any electronic device that is immune to hacking. I think you know the answer without even asking that question. Turning on CVRs would be one way to further transparency. Thank you.
Steve Holm again.
Um,
28
Mr. Holm?
Yes, only one comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a policy of only one comment, but
Okay,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much. But
Michael Bowler, 558 West Howard Street. I think it's obvious that we, the people, are split on this issue, not on one side or the other. Growing up in a conservative family, the privacy of vote was really enshrined in me. And when I call for candidates, call on behalf of various candidates, I'm frequently told that the person I'm talking to does not want to reveal who they're going to be supporting. As I understand this possibility of turning on the recording mechanisms on the voting machines, it could possibly, especially in precincts that are small, really destroy that person's right to privacy in terms of a secret ballot. So that's one point. The other point is that every step we take away from our elected official, the auditor, and go to another body to make decisions imperils our vote possibly. We need to have our vote be sacred and not taken away from us if bodies are going to be able to vote on issues like this. At one point, could there possibly be a vote in the future in terms of votes being denied because of procedural factors, for instance, fraudulent voting machines? There is a paper ballot in terms of a trail. That is a different kind of backup. It's not electronic. I would suggest that we go with that because that is a different kind of backup system. Thank you.
My name is Maria Pawlowski and I live at 1289 Windcrest Drive. I am asking you guys to turn on the CVR record, vote record. It seems to me today that we have half the room that feels like this is not a security problem, that, am I speaking loud enough? Sorry. That our elections and voting is secure and that there's no chance for things to be interfered with, and that their potential compromise of privacy is more important than ensuring that our voting is secure. I would like to read as quickly as I can an immediate release on Tuesday, September 27th of 2022, very recent. I did not know that this was a court case that the Justice.gov U.S. Attorney Office announced that Ozzie Myers, 79, of Philadelphia, was sentenced to 30 months in prison, $100,000 fine, et cetera, because after pleading guilty to conspiracy to deprive voters of civil rights, bribery, obstruction of justice, falsification of voting records, conspiring to illegally vote in a federal election, and for orchestrating schemes to fraudulently stuff the ballot boxes for specific Democratic candidates in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and 18 in Pennsylvania elections. The defendant was immediately reprimanded into custody. Myers admitted to bribing the election officials to illegally add votes to certain candidates of their mutual political party in primary elections. These candidates were individuals running for judicial office where campaigns had hired Myers. Others were candidates for various federal, state, and local elected officials that Myers favored for a variety of reasons. Myers would solicit payments from his clients in the form of cash or checks as consulting fees and then use the portions of these funds to pay election officials to tamper with election results. I'm not going to continue reading the whole thing for sake of time. You can look it up on your own on the U.S. Attorney's Office, Department of Justice. But this is one example of confirmed election fraud, and I think that turning on the CVR vote cast records is one way for me, the public, a hardworking citizen, to ensure that my vote counts. Thank you.
Don Evanson, Rolling Stone Township. I am a trained election judge. I have served as an election judge. I was on the ballot board in 2020, so I'm very familiar with the process and the good training. This should be an issue for Democrats and Republicans alike, people of all parties. We cannot have confidence in the machines. Cybersecurity professionals will tell you there's no machine, no system in the world that cannot be hacked. The purpose of the CVRs and the machines are by default supposed to be turned on. If they're not on, someone's turned them off. And if you don't know who did that, you need to ask. What the information of the CVRs is public information available to anyone that wants to see it, and it becomes public when the polls close on election day. The purpose of the CVRs is to reconcile the tape to what went into what the machine has processed. And you can have all the faith in the system here in the county, but you don't know unless you have access to the CVRs and can do some, run some checks on it, as Jerry Wolf did in Fillmore County. So I ask that you assure that the CVRs are turned on the machines. You don't know, you're using an outside consultant to help with this, with the machinery. And you don't know what the outside consultant's doing. With the CVR, we can have a check on the outside consultant. And for those people that are concerned about personal information getting out, they should be very concerned about your use of electronic poll pads around the county. Those are on the internet and you have no control over them. They're administered by your vendors. So, and another issue, you just heard about the federal district court case out in New York, I believe it was. People with open minds that have been investigating elections have discovered that personal information for election officials, such as Sandra Sukla and local election judges, is on a server in China. And that's not to be, there is documentation that'll affirm that. So we need to be concerned about the use of machines. We should go to paper ballots, hand counting, and everyone vote on election day in person. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here in the audience? And in addition to this, if there are folks who are attending this meeting over the internet and would like to make a public comment, can you unmute yourself and get our attention and proceed? I'm going to ask 2 more times. Is there anyone else here in the audience or attending over the internet that would like to participate in the public comment period? And for the final time, is there anyone else here in the audience or participating on the internet that would like to make a public comment? Please do so now. Hearing none, public comment is closed. Our first item of business would be to approve the county board minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Olson has moved, Kavesi has seconded approval of the county board minutes from September 27th of 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item of business would be acknowledging receipt of approved committee minutes.
Move to acknowledge 5.1 and 5.2.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Jacob has moved and Commissioner Olson has seconded acknowledgement of the receipt of Board of Adjustment July 21, 2022 minutes and the Planning Commission of August 18th, 2022. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to adjust the agenda if needed and then deal with consent comments. So Commissioner Ward.
I would just like to have one possible future board action, please.
Commissioner Kavesi.
I have several announcements and a committee report. Thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Jacob.
Nothing for me.
County Attorney or Administrator? I will have a future board action too. Okay. So I think we have some adjustments to the agenda.
I don't think we did.
No, I move to approve the agenda as presented. I don't think
Okay,
anybody,
with
nobody
the-
pulled anything. Well,
Oh,
with
the
the,
difference
yeah,
at the end.
yeah.
That's really what I
Okay,
meant.
yeah.
Okay, so
Second.
Commissioner Ward has moved and Commissioner Olson has seconded approval of the agenda as presented, but with a few announcements and board actions at the end. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, our agenda is passed. Administrator Holte, could you read the consent agenda for the record?
7.1, approve submittable renewal agreement with Grant Software. 7.2, approve resolution to cancel stale warrant checks. 7.3, approve Minnesota Department of Health Community Health Board Grant Project Agreement for State Health Improvement Partnership. 7.4, approve Minnesota Department of Human Services Amendment Number 3 for grant contract number 173-184, Children's Mental Health Respite Care Services. 7.5, approve voucher payment to Teresa Stokes for well replacement. 7.6, approve amendment to extend 2020 subsurface sewage treatment system upgrade aid agreement deadline until December 31st, 2023. 7.7, approve voucher payment to Jeff and Sandy Larson for equipment and installation to remove contaminants from water. 7.8, approve 2023 towards zero deaths enforcement single traffic safety officer grant agreement. 7.9, confirm payment of disbursement.
Thank you.
Move to approve the consent business as read.
Second.
Commissioner Jacob has moved and Commissioner Ward has seconded approval of the consent business as was read by the interim county administrator. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, consent agenda is passed. Our first item under general business is to receive a report from the state auditor regarding the 2021 audit. Are they online or here in the room?
Online.
Okay.
Good morning. Oh, this is Stephanie Erickson. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Meyer and members of the Winona County Board of Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Erickson. I'm with the State Auditor's Office, and I'm here with Carrie Liffrig Schaefer with our office as well. We were both part of the 2020 Winona County audit, and we're here to present the results of our audit. A copy of the county's annual financial report and our management and compliance report was included in your board packet. First, I want to make sure to thank management and staff of Winona County for their cooperation and assistance during the audit. Again, this year, our audit, for the most part, was performed remotely, and we sincerely appreciate everyone's assistance in providing us the information requested. We realize that an audit takes a lot of staff time and time away from their normal duties, and we appreciate the completeness, thoroughness, and promptness of the information that was provided to us for us to perform the audit. We audited Winona County for the year ended December 31st, 2021, and issued our opinion on the county's financial statements and issued our management and compliance report. We performed our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, with government auditing standards, and with uniform guidance, which is federal requirements related to federal award programs. Our opinion on the county's financial statements was dated September 9th, 2022, and our opinion is included in the county's financial report. Our opinion again this year is unmodified, which is a clean opinion, and it is the best opinion that can be issued. This means that the financial statements are fairly presented and conform with applicable accounting standards. We also audited the county's major federal programs and have issued an opinion on them. Our opinion on each of the county's major federal programs was unmodified. This means that the county has complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements that were direct and material to those major federal programs. And this year we audited 3 major federal programs, which were the Highway Planning and Construction Cluster, Child Support Enforcement, and the Medicaid Cluster. And just as a note, in our 2020 audit, our opinion on the Medicaid Cluster was qualified. And this year we did see an improvement in that program when we looked at eligibility. And so we were able to issue an unmodified opinion on that program this year. During our audit, any findings related to internal control, compliance, Minnesota legal compliance, federal program internal control over compliance, and federal program compliance were discussed with the respective management and staff. And at the end of our audit, we discussed the written finding, the one that is included in our management and compliance report, with members of management and board chair Meyer. Our management and compliance report for the county includes a corrective action plan, as well as a summary schedule of prior audit findings, both of which are provided by county management. The corrective action plan is management's plan for resolving the current year's finding and is provided to us just before our report is issued. So we do not audit that information included in the corrective action plan, but we are required to follow up on any findings in the next year's audit. And so we will do that for next year's audit. The summary schedule of prior audit findings lists the findings that were reported in the prior year's management and compliance report and provides the status of each of those findings, whether it would be fully corrected, partially corrected, or not corrected. In our 2021 management and compliance report for the county, we reported 1 finding. It was a repeat finding from prior years, and we were able to resolve 1 finding from the prior year. As I mentioned before, we did see improvement in the Medicaid and medical assistance program relating to eligibility. And so that was a less severe finding this year than it was last year. In our findings, the schedule of findings and question costs, we include the following information about each of our findings, or the 1 finding that was reported this year. We list a criteria, and this is the basis by which we are measuring against. We include a condition, and that's what the issue is, the issue that we found. There's context, which is additional information that provides more perspective. The effect is what the condition has led to or could lead to. The cause is why this finding exists, which was also reviewed with management. And then recommendation, which is how we suggest to improve the issue. This year's finding in our management and compliance report relates to eligibility intake function for the medical assistance program. The county has provided its corrective action plan for this finding. And again, as with all reported findings, we will review this during the next year's audit, and management will be required to provide a current summary schedule of prior audit findings with the status of this finding. I'm happy to say that we did not report any internal control over financial reporting findings, nor did we issue or report any findings related to Minnesota legal compliance. And the 1 finding from last year that we were able to note as fully corrected related to the coronavirus Relief Fund program, and that related to activities allowed or unallowed and allowable cost principles. Does anybody have any questions?
So you are state auditors, you're following the directive of the state auditor and everything. Are any of these and you do multiple counties, are these problems universal throughout the system? And can we contribute some of this problem to the lack of both federal and state software systems that help track these things and eliminate these problems?
Correct. We do audit other counties throughout the state of Minnesota, and this finding related to the eligibility intake function for the medical assistance program is one that we see quite often. And just depending on the numbers that we find, the number of exceptions that we find in all of the different pieces that we're testing for eligibility, that determines whether the finding is a written finding or whether it's a finding that we just discuss verbally. So even if some counties did not have a written finding for this, there could still be some issues. And I have heard that the system used is somewhat old. And so as with any system, updates would probably be beneficial. Also with the medical assistance program, there is a lot of information that needs to be requested from the participant in the program, which sometimes is difficult to get current information. And so that's part of it as well.
You can be not politically correct and say it is very old system and it has not been updated. That's a fact. But the county, and the counties in a lot of our work, the counties individually spend a lot of money on attempting to upgrade software and systems and everything. But really this, in my opinion, this is a state and federal issue that they just continually don't address. And they expect counties to keep addressing this for them. Yet you come back and tell us that we're not doing something right. So do you also send that portion or that finding to higher levels in the state of Minnesota and the federal government so that they continually hear that this is problematic and they're part of the solution?
So when we issue a report, our reports are also sent to any funding source that provides federal funding. So the State Department of Human Services provides funding to the county, so they get a copy of this report. And I do know that staff at the Department of Human Services do review our reports because we get emails from them. And then also when there is a single audit performed, which is what Winona County had because they expended more than $750,000 of federal funding. The report is also submitted to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And so it's available for the public. It's available for all of the federal agencies as well to see those comments that have been made.
Okay, thank you. And on a personal note, did Carla retire?
She did retire, yeah.
I thought so. All right, well, good for her. She was always a very dedicated employee and worked with Winona County for many years. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Is there further discussion or questions? Otherwise, I do have a comment. So I appreciate all the work done by staff and by administration. And I think we got an update this week about where we're at in terms of trying to fix our staffing issues. But the report says, and this is on our packet, page 258, the current supervisor has 32 staff, which hinders the ability to conduct supervisory QA desk reviews. And we do have a plan in place to put a second supervisor there. And this is part of our corrective action plan. So I appreciate the updates. We're not there yet though, so.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time.
Hearing no other comments, next item of business is to receive the Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office 2021 Annual Report.
Hello, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. Thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Ross Reichert. I'm your medical examiner and the chief medical examiner for the Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office. Here for our annual report. I think we have it electronically, so we'll just give it just a second here. All right, thank you. If you just go to the next page. So this next one, I can click it. All right. Well, there we go. So the dark blue counties are the counties that we're the medical examiner for. And so this is where we provide full services for those counties. It's quite nice because it's the majority of southeastern Minnesota, and it follows other public health and emergency preparedness types of patterns as well, which is one of a really important concept. The white blue counties are ones that we do consult autopsies for, but are not the medical examiner. So we're covering a significant region of Minnesota. Oops, wrong direction. Okay, so this is our staff. I'm joined here by my colleague, Monica Kindle. She's our supervisor of our death investigators and really helps organize the office to no small feat. But what's really important is the list of our Winona County death investigators. These are really critical. These are people that are responding here in the county 24/7, 365. And this is really where the death investigation begins. So I can't say enough about how important those investigators are for the entire system to work. We have another number of people listed here that are support back in our central office in Olmsted County. And then the bottom line is really our administrative staff, which is pretty significant and helps us put together the presentations such as this today. All right, so this is a high-level summary. We had 347 deaths. 309 were reported to the medical examiner's office. The number of deaths that had a postmortem examination was 41. And then we had the death certificates without postmortem examination was 206. And so these are cases that would fall under our jurisdiction, but we would have enough documentation of what occurred that we would not need to do a postmortem examination. So someone falls and has an injury, they break their hip or leg or something and survive for a period of time, but die as a complication of that. That would be a non-natural death, so it would fall under our jurisdiction. We wouldn't necessarily need to do an autopsy. Interestingly, by the time you take in cremation permits, the deaths that are reported to us in hospice deaths, our office touches about 89% of the deaths that occur in Winona County. So we're very much integrated into the system. Just as a brief reminder of death certificate information, been a lot of discussion the last several years over death certificates. Never thought there'd be such a hot button topic, but it is. So the cause of death is underlying reason why someone died. The manner of death is the circumstances. There's 5 different categories, which we'll go through. And it has all sorts of information that is collected for public health reasons and epidemiological reasons that aren't necessarily printed on the death certificate that go to the family, but that information is gathered. Then that information is either used by the relatives to just, for closure of what happened to an individual, but also there's many, many things that are require a death certificate to accomplish. But then that information flows up through the Department of Health in Minnesota and ultimately ends up at the CDC. And so it's kind of amazing that it really begins with our frontline death investigator, assessing the scene and determining what happened, and how that information flows all the way through the system from the county to the state to the federal level. So this is by the category of manner of death. So there's 5 categories: homicide, suicide, accident, undetermined, and natural. And so the vast majority of the deaths were natural in Winona year over year, as well as last year. And we'll go into each of these categories in more detail. So this is unnatural causes. So this is anything that's not a natural death. And so we had 4 motor vehicle accidents. We had 17 jump/falls, and those are the public health terminology that we're using, which sometimes surprises individuals, but these are typically elderly individuals with multiple medical conditions, and they fall like in their residence and have an injury, and that injury then leads to their downward spiral. And just as an example, depending on the data that you read, like if you're elderly and you break a hip, it's about a 50% mortality in 1 year. Sometimes some of the data is up to 2 years. So it's not a trivial That's the reason why it's a never event in hospitals that are reported. Falls are a major issue. We had 9 drug overdoses, which we'll go into more as well, more detail. So if you look at suicide by means, firearms, we had 4. We had 1 hanging, and we had 1 motor vehicle related fatality that was a suicide. This is suicide by age. And so you can see that the majority of them are older, and we didn't have any in the 11 to 17. We had 1 in the 18 to 25, 1 in 26 to 44, and then 3 in the 45 to 64, and 1 over 65. So again, this is something that people, and I think specifically this board expressed interest in the age of suicides. And so this is something that we have added to our data collection so people can appreciate that, and if there is a pattern. The suicide per capita, and so again, it's important to realize that we're dealing with small numbers here, thankfully, but that's also what can shift this quite significantly. But Winona is below the national average, which is that red line, and you can see how we compare across the other counties in southeastern Minnesota. Homicide, so there was 1 homicide last year, and that was a stabbing that had complications related to it. So this is homicides per capita. So you can see the highest is Mississippi. You can see where Minnesota falls in slightly above the national average, which is the red line. Again, we're dealing with relatively small numbers. So if you go from 2 to 4, that can really move your percentage. But again, that's a comparison. Accidental deaths by type, as I mentioned, falls. It's significant. We have the drug overdoses. We had 3 motor vehicle accidents, and I'll show you more data on all of those. So this is by the motor vehicle accidents, by crashes. So we had 2 auto slash SUVs and 1 motorcycle. And here on this page, you can see this is the type of vehicle and the location that they occur. So we've been tracking this year over year to see if there is clusters or anything that might stand out as a particular safety issue. Again, they're relatively evenly distributed. So this is the number of deaths by year. So again, we have, I think 5 years of data up there. And so you can see the number in the year. And so it gives you a sense if there is a cluster, but except for, obviously they're following the roads, but as you might imagine, generally speaking, but nothing particular stands out. But again, that's something that, other folks can look at as well, because the sheriff's department or other law enforcement. This is motor vehicle fatalities per capita. So we had 4 in Winona last year, but 1 of those was a suicide. So it's really 3 motor vehicle accidents, if you will. So that would put us below the national average, or right at it per 100,000. So again, this is something we're keep tabs on. You can get a sense of what it looks like across the southeastern region. Accidental falls by age group, and you can see that we don't even start below 65. This is one category. Although these are non-natural deaths, 5 years ago, we just said greater than 65. And so now we've expanded to 95 plus. So it reflects our aging population. We all are participants in that.
Question on all the data. So is this, if it happened in Winona County, or is it if you're a resident of Winona County?
So that's a good question. So this is if it happened, this data here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, this data is here is if it happened in Winona County.
Okay.
When we have the per capita rate, we're capturing if they were transported. So if the injury occurred in Winona. So if you were injured here, transported to Olmsted and died, we would capture that under these total numbers. So we're capturing it both ways, the number of fatalities that occurred in the county, and then we capture that if they were transported, we also capture that number. So we have both the in-county deaths and the ones in which the injuries occurred in the county.
Okay, so going back to some of those earlier ones, so being that we're a border county, we have Wisconsin and Iowa.
Yep.
So if you live in your region, Southeast Minnesota, but you die in Wisconsin, is that recorded in that earlier data as? Minnesota
It would
death?
depend on where they were transported, but oftentimes if the injuries occur and just in general in Minnesota, we have agreements to bring those individuals back and do those autopsies here in the state. So we are capturing that for the most part. I mean, obviously, if they got transported to a small facility and then maybe to Madison or something, multiple iterations away. But if they die basically in adjoining counties, those are coming back to us. So yeah, that's a good question. Wisconsin's happy to give us that work back.
Recognition.
Yeah. So, but it's good for us too. So this is deaths related to poisonings, which is basically drug overdose deaths. And I'll show you some more detail of it. But we had 7 that were illegal, 2 mixed, and 2 mixed. So this is what it looks like as far as the combination of drugs. Cocaine and methamphetamine are still out there. They've kind of been in the background, particularly methamphetamine, even though we've been talking much about opioids. But what you then see below that is the other 6 all had some version of fentanyl within it. So I can't overstate like how much fentanyl is driving the overdose fatalities across the whole region and really across the country. So that's really the wild card. When we looked at these in another county, as far as like did a deep dive in each one of these the types of overdoses, many of these individuals are chronic drug users, and they probably have gotten something that they with fentanyl in it that they didn't anticipate. So they're used to buying, pills that have been illegally just distributed, but they didn't realize that these were fake pills that actually had fentanyl in it. They thought they were buying cocaine, but the cocaine had fentanyl in it. They thought it was heroin, but it also had fentanyl in it. So it's kind of taking what was already a dangerous activity to making it extremely dangerous and potentially fatal every time people use. So
of these drugs, which one is Narcan effective for?
all the opioids. So not, so like the fentanyl, heroin, morphine, etc.
So Narcan would be effective treatment.
Yes, it would
And
be.
do we keep any statistics? How many people have been treated with Narcan?
So that's
Because
that's a common question that I get, and it's very difficult to assess. So for many of our situations, they're found dead at home, so they weren't given Narcan.
Sure.
But it's really difficult because people have Narcan available, so we don't know how many times it's been given, and also if they come directly through medical routes to the hospital, then it's not, law enforcement isn't involved in that, and so they're not tracking that. So that would be then in their private medical record. I mean, one of the challenges, to be honest, I mean, we could spend all day talking about this topic, but I mean, one of the challenges too is that the tolerances of the individuals is so high that it's not necessarily just one dose of Narcan. Sometimes it requires multiple doses just because of how high their tolerance is. This is the drug overdose rate per capita. And so here in Winona, these blue graphs are where the injury occurred. So this is a higher number. So this is 10. So this is good to your point that I previously said there were 8 deaths in the county from drug overdoses, but there were 10 in which the drug overdose occurred in the county, 2 of which were transported and later died. So that's the total number. So you can see how we stack up. Again, we're relatively small numbers, but can move this. But you can see where we compare it to like, West Virginia. This is a contrast, most severely affected state. The next one is natural causes by category. So heart disease and cancer are still the leading causes of death. Neurologic is, sort of bouncing up and down, which will probably, I think, increase somewhat over time because as the population ages, that's a risk factor for dementia, stroke, etc. Large population. The pulmonary deaths spiked up last year or 2020 and are back down, and that's probably related to COVID deaths. And so what we've seen is that the pulmonary deaths really went up in counties that have hospitals, because that's where the individuals were dying from the complications of COVID. Whereas the other counties that don't have hospitals, the pulmonary deaths stayed the same. So it's likely a reflection of the COVID related deaths. Death by age group. So if you really want a quick snapshot of the health of a community, you can just look and see how much it's shifted to the older age population, because then people are dying of natural diseases. When you see peaks lower, like in the 18 to 25 and younger categories, reflects non-natural deaths. So these are suicides, accidents, and homicides. Because most people, younger people, are not dying of their long-term diseases or cancer and heart disease. So again, this is very much shifted to the older population, which is really what you want to see. And then the final slide is just a summary of our activities. Again, relatively stable year over year, 247 investigations, 62 death certificates, went to 87 scenes, did 41 postmortem examinations, and we had 309 deaths reported to us. So pretty consistent year over year.
Mr. Olson.
Just a question.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of years ago, we never heard of fentanyl. It's just coming in because of the opioid epidemic that was caused by the pharmaceuticals. So now they're taking that away and they're substituting fentanyl.
So yes, we had not really heard that much about fentanyl. I mean, we had periodic outbreaks of fentanyl because fentanyl is relatively easy to illicitly produce. And so, I mean, a couple of things happen. So one is you have the pharmaceutical companies and people had lots of prescription medications. And what happens is someone then can't afford those medications anymore. They don't have access to it. And then that's when they shift to heroin. And then what started happening in the US is people started lacing heroin with fentanyl because fentanyl is much more potent in a smaller volume. So it's much easier to transport. So instead of having to ship a huge amount of product around, they can basically ship an envelope from a foreign country into the United States and create a lot of pills from it, or in basically increase the amount of what they would call heroin that's going to be sold. And then people have been making fake pills as well. So people think that they were getting illicitly directed prescription pills, but it's actually fentanyl. So these pills are, I mean, it's terrifying because they're basically indistinguishable by the naked eye from what a regular pill would look like. So it was done from, obviously there's people who are wanting to use this and now people are using it. So initially people were overdosing and not even realizing what this is. And now people are seeking out this because now it's like, here's a different high, here's a more potent high. And so there's sort of a combination of now people are looking for that because of their increased tolerance. But ultimately the fentanyl boom was my understanding is mainly a financial decision because it was cheaper and easier to transport and they could generate more money. Yeah.
So you alluded to it. COVID deaths, they were reported under pulmonary?
Yes,
Okay.
the vast majority of them.
Okay. And do we know how many, if COVID showed up on a death certificate, how many of those were actually autopsied or anything? Was there a need to?
So we could pull that data, but so initially we were doing those autopsies. So initially in the beginning, we were actually bringing in tons of people that were just dying at home and doing the nasopharyngeal swabs just to see how prevalent it was or if it was in our communities. And so we were doing that. And initially we were doing autopsies on those to understand what was going on and see if it really was COVID or COVID related. And so sometimes what will happen is these cases initially fall under a medical examiner jurisdiction. And then once there's good testing and documentation, then it becomes not really a medical examiner's jurisdiction anymore. We still do COVID autopsies and we were doing COVID autopsies the entire time. And it provided a lot of specimens. I mean, these are gracious individuals that these are signed for consented hospital autopsies. They basically were a lot of the specimens that helped develop some of the testing that goes on. And now actually we're part of a big research project, an NIH funded research project. We're one of 6 autopsy centers that's studying the long-term effects of COVID. So we're seeing, doing autopsies on people who died, not necessarily of complications of COVID, but had COVID, and we're collecting these specimens to evaluate to see what those long-term complications are.
And when is that report due?
Oh, God. It's a monster of a project. There is, you'll start seeing reports coming out probably in the next year to 2 years. There's a lot of pressure from the federal government, as you might imagine, on this, and there's been a huge amount of money put this direction.
Yeah.
I would say that the autopsy component got a lot less, a smaller sliver than some of the other cohorts. But anyhow, I'm sure you'll see more of this published.
You're already seeing,
bits and pieces of it coming out.
Wondering what it is. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it was an interesting process.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to how wonderful it is to work with Dr. Reichert's office. We do, unfortunately, a few murders every once in a while, which he alluded to, and it's been a great partnership with my office and Dr. Reichert, and we've been able to obtain, in one case particularly, when Mayo built a 3D model of a victim's head to get a better sentencing outcome and put that person in prison for 30 years or more. So, and then on the drug side, just being able to call up Dr. Reichert. I mean, he's very, very personable and gracious with his time to our office. So it's more what we pay Mayo. Don't raise your rates yet, but what we pay Mayo is well worth it for the medical examiner because it goes above and beyond. And he's also spoken to groups in our third. Okay. So he's been a great partner, both professionally examining, doing autopsies, but also then joining us on some seminars and things like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that a lot.
Are there any further questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We are at item 8.3, receive update for audiovisual capabilities in the boardroom.
Madam Chair, fellow board members. Good
Morning.
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 So per your request, I believe back in June, you wanted us to look at a few options to remove the equipment sitting in front of Heidi here and look at some auto sensing options for the cameras. I don't know if you have digital copies of the proposals that did come in from the three vendors I met with, but I can just go through them quickly. I know there's a lot of technical jargon in here. I'll skip over that for you.
Yeah, I did read them and I was like,
The
I'm gonna
first,
wait.
yeah, so I did have three vendors come in and visit this room and went through all of our equipment. The first vendor, Bloom Technologies, which is formerly Tyranny. They're the vendor that set this room up. They built it initially in 2019.
Yep.
Their proposal, I'll just get straight to it, is right around $8,000, just shy of $8,000. And that's mostly a programming-based model, which would switch the cameras via an audio solution that is built in through the Crestron system. It's a little complicated. So there's that solution there. The second solution, we had Advanced Multimedia come in. The reason I gave these folks a call is because I seen their vans sitting over there at Fastenal. And so I knew they were doing some work in the area, and I got them to come in. Their solution was interesting because what they proposed is they would put an infrared sensor right above the podium here, and it would be very indiscreet. It would look something similar to that round device in the ceiling. And it would basically auto switch. As soon as someone's at the podium, the infrared would know that this mic is picking up, the camera would show my face. Once any of you started to speak, it would go back to the board. If you notice the first line, and a lot of these proposals, there are other lines that were added. The reason I did that, I was kind of trying to future-proof some things that I wanted to clean up additionally, but not really pertinent. Yep, pardon me?
What page?
I'm on, for Advanced Multimedia, right on the first page.
295.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the agenda. So the cost is relatively low at about $2,716. Unfortunately, once we start getting into moving this equipment where Heidi is, that's where that additional cost comes in. All three quotes were right around the $7,000 to $9,000 mark. Moving all of this is pretty involved. We're getting into the ceiling, recabling, reprogramming. So if you look at the second price there of the $9,206, that's a more accurate description of what that would probably cost. There is that option on the first line if that equipment was left here on the desk, and I know that that's something you all wanted to be moved. And then the third proposal, Sim Sound and Video, They're a local company here in Winona. Their proposal basically would replace a lot of the equipment. They would replace this video board and build a new rack over here. The rack is working as it is, but when it was designed too small, so it does overheat a little bit. So we wanted to kind of look at an option to rebuild that rack the way it should have been in the first place, move this equipment into that rack. And that amount was, and there's a lot of different amounts. And like I said, a lot of it isn't pertinent to this. 13,561. They did offer a trade-in to buy back this equipment here, which would reduce that amount to 10,261. So that would remove all of this outdated equipment, rebuild our entire rack system, reprogram everything, and then give you the auto sensing that you were asking for. So there are 3 different proposals. Depending on your conversations, we can pursue one or all, or even try to rework some of it. But I thought I'd at least get something in front of you to give you some options.
Are there questions? I have a question.
Sure.
but-
Do we have budget line item?
Unfortunately, no. The budget was prepared just prior to this request from.
This would be additional.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So when we had our conversation, what I remember is there are issues with the sight lines because of that folding door.
Right.
And then I have had complaints from the public about their inability to hear when they're in the back of the room. So this addresses only really the issue of the camera switching.
Yep, this is
Okay.
mostly just for the auto sensing. As far as the audio is concerned, I think we did make that improvement. I think people are able to hear it fine as long as someone's in front of the mic. The problem we ran into was up here, COVID, the masks. So I think that problem is better.
And I
So-
think there's less squeaking. You know how the mic would either be too,
Squeal.
yeah,
Right.
that I haven't heard that.
Yeah, we did have our audio processor replaced a few months ago, and that seemed to help a lot. It was.
You
in
do have
need
the
of
camera
repair.
switched. I know it's the last meeting. The camera, if you use the podium from the front now. It's
Yep, so that's manually done by Heidi right now.
You do that
Heidi.
manually?
Yep, so Heidi would need to be, or someone would need to be here to manually adjust that on the screens.
So you're saying this would,
This would allow it to be auto sense, so there would be no manual, no one would have to manually switch the cameras.
so as from staff standpoint, does this, is Heidi dedicated in a different position, or does it free her time up that this is going to be automated and she can be working at something else in her office? Or, I mean, are we gaining any efficiencies there? Or-
There would be some efficiencies because she wouldn't have to focus on the switching of the camera. So while she would still be in the board meeting from her office most likely, but would probably be able to multitask a little bit easier.
Although we probably would need her to be here at night to turn the lights back.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
think we just get around meeting without.
Sorry, Heidi, I'm trying. I'm trying to get her out of the chair.
The other committees that use this room with the audio, with the visual thing is planning, Board of Adjustment. Is there anything else? The parks? Pardon me?
Pays in here
EDA.
the most.
Okay.
How often do we close that partition?
I've heard never
None.
since I've been here.
Yeah, it was a good idea.
And I
Actually, we use it frequently.
Do you?
We
Okay.
flood it for when we
Oh,
need
for-
conference rooms.
Yeah,
checked with maintenance and this is a few months ago and they said they hadn't moved it, but I'm sure whoever's running the meetings probably does, so.
Yeah.
But
So you
guess
feel
that
like,
was inaccurate.
I mean, the partition needs to be there.
Well, if we want this to be a versatile use room, because we have limited conference rooms, was the concept of having
And
it.
I understand the cost of that was pretty significant to have that put in, so
Yeah,
to remove
I
it would
I
probably not
wouldn't pay
be
to take it out. No.
right.
Well, I don't know. I think we've seen some good improvements. I think sound was one of the biggest things. And just looking at the picture here, the picture seems to be of good quality in our screen. I don't see the need to upgrade at this point in time.
So what I maybe
know if
could
we're-
propose is when we build out next year's budget, if this is something that you're not on board with right now, that I could come up with some options and work with that.
I'm okay with that. How about?
in immediate need. I think we've made good
You have
improvements.
made a lot of improvements.
Yeah.
Appreciate
No doubt
it.
about
Yeah.
And we like Heidi at our meeting.
Okay, any other
Okay.
questions?
Oh,
All
thank
right,
you.
thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for doing the research.
Yep,
No problem.
absolutely.
By next year, you can probably just put the camera on our head and just, you know.
So I guess before we leave the subject, that is very congested. I saw when Karen tried to come in, Heidi had to basically get up and get out of the way. Would it be possible to take one section off that desk and move it down somewhere where the rack is? Open that, I mean, Heidi would be in the room without being.
From what I understand, this desk was made specifically for the space, and there is a lot of hard wiring in through the floor in the concrete.
Yep.
So I think that would be pretty difficult. What I could do in the meantime is look for a quote or some kind of effort to just move this equipment, maybe skip the auto sensing of the cameras, but move this so she could be placed back there and there would be more room there.
So is she able to see because if she's in the room, that'd be great. And that's also where people are having difficulty with sight lines.
Yeah.
Right. And that's partially why I wanted to look at the rebuilding of that rack too, just because of the placement of it. I don't think it's placed correctly, and I think it could be moved
You
in
can
more.
just move the chairs, shift the chairs over there somewhat, rearrange the chairs for the viewing and get a bungee and tighten up the door. I see gaps. You could gain a foot, by just pushing the panels in. It's,
We could
get a
look at
rock,
some options.
get a rock and set against there and hold it back against the wall.
on the rock.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just get a rock or a brick. We got some bricks across the street. We can put some bricks in front of it. Prop the door open.
Item 8.4, receive the monthly finance and budget update.
Good morning. I'm going to provide the August update.
Good morning, Pat.
Beginning cash in August started at $14.4 million. Actual revenues were $650,000. Actual expenses were $1.5 million. Ending cash was $13.5 million. For the whole year, it started out at $14.8 million. We had actual revenues of $12.3, actual expenses of $13.6, ending cash is $13.5. The variance in the general fund for through August is a negative 1.2 compared to a negative 1.8. And then for the total, it's a negative 2.7 compared to a negative 2.1 million. I do want to point out that Human Services in the month of August actually had a positive fund balance. I did look actually in September. It is negative now, but we still are about $500,000 better than we were in 2021. So it's still trending good. Keep our fingers crossed that it keeps that way till the end of the year. Any questions on that document? If not, we'll go to the summary document. Beginning cash started out at 19 million. Actual revenues are 28.1 million. Actual expenses are 28.4. Ending cash is 18.7 million. Variance is a negative 323 and a negative 2.1 million for 21. Any questions on that document, or we'll move to the summary budget. Summary budget, in the month of August, we're at 67%. There are two funds that are trending a little bit higher, and that is general fund and actually human services. They're both at 68%. We'll just continue to track those, but I see no concerns at this point. We'll just monitor it as we go along. I do want to point out that interest is, we projected 180. We're at 99,000 right at this point. So we're a little bit below the amount, but interest changes all the time, and we are starting to get a little bit better interest rate. But again, some of these interests were actually invested a while ago when they were lower interest rates. Any question on this document? If not, thank you.
Thank you. Final general business item is 8.5, discuss activating vote cast record mechanism and voting machines.
So this is where we're trying to get the third vote, or this is, no,
We're here. I think we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the third, we had the
This is
third
the
vote.
third
I think this
time.
is a real one.
This is the real
Yes.
discussion.
And I guess I saw Sandra earlier. Is she in the room?
Yep, she's in the back.
Sandra, could you join us for this discussion?
I had no sight line on Sandra at all. Which doesn't mean she's invisible, but
No,
thank you for
no.
being here.
Good
morning, everyone.
Good morning. So the question I think we've heard from the audience and it's been proposed to me. And it was said this morning, by default, the CVR is turned on. So is it on our equipment or is it off on our equipment? Is it a matter of programming? Yes, no, on, off?
I am a I'm a manual learner rather than a visual learner.
Uh-huh.
Our upgrade to electionware in December of 21 is what has enabled the equipment to generate this so-called cast vote record. I would have a much clearer answer if, when we're programming the media, if it would say turn cast vote record on, but it doesn't say that. You have options: capture all images, capture write-ins, or capture nothing. One of the selling points of electionware was the ability to capture these write-in images, which would take a lot of the workload off of our poll workers at the end of the evening and put it more in the auditor treasurer's office. So just kind of an oversight of elections. Obviously, the election we had in May was unusual, had no write-ins. I did not turn that capture write-in button on because I didn't need it. August gave us the opportunity to begin experimenting with the write-ins because of the Congressional District 1 race. However, when we only had one registered write-in to keep track of, while I had that option turned on, I didn't experiment with it because A, I ran out of time, B, there wasn't the need. So for the November general, I have enabled the DS200, the thumb drive, the medias, the electionware to capture write-in images. I did review the training that we had a little webinar training last week that unfortunately I had a lot of interruptions during, so I wasn't able to sit in on the entire thing, but I did watch the tape. It seems to me as though the cast vote record can be generated regardless if you're capturing all images or just the write-ins. I'm not so sure about if you don't capture any images. Like I said, that's one thing I would truthfully have to experiment with to be able to give you an answer.
The vendor,
The vendor can give you all sorts of answers and maybe you'd be satisfied with them, but however, like I said, I have to play around with it. I have to experiment.
and with the election coming up a few short weeks,
Yep.
do you have time to experiment?
I
with
have
it?
to.
You have to. Okay.
That's my
part of it.
job.
Sure.
The unfortunate thing is I still don't have our thumb drives yet. I have our test deck, our paper ballots that are pre-marked, and then we have to compare that test deck to the answer key that's provided. I checked with a few neighboring counties last week and they also had not received their thumb drives. So we're not the lone wolf out here.
Provides the thumb drives.
It's a vendor
vendor?
named Sea Change. They're also the folks that print our ballots for us.
Okay. All right. And are they vetted or approved by the Secretary of State's office or anybody?
I do not know if the vendors themselves need to be certified. I know all of the election equipment that's used in the state of Minnesota does need to be certified. The only thing I can give you assurance about is we have used Sea Change for as long as I've been in this position, and I believe my predecessors also used them. I would honestly say I think Sea Change probably has a majority of the business in the state of Minnesota.
And what's the thumb drive function? What, to
So
capture the?
So what
And?
the thumb drive is the accumulation media. Actually, we have a number of thumb drives that we use now because with this upgrade to electionware, there's some additional security features. So I have a thumb drive that will actually set up some accumulation media on our standalone Windows 7 computer. We also have to enter that thumb drive on each county DS200 at every precinct here at our 2 county machines in order to let the machine know, okay, this is the August election, this is the November election, this is what to expect. And then and those are universal across the county. And then we also have our precinct specific thumb drives that if you go to Unica Township, if you go to Norton Township, they each have a specific thumb drive program to only read their ballots. And we not only have thumb drives to use on election day, we also have a backup in the event we do have a failure. And then of course, our ultimate backup is if we have complete failure of thumb drives, we are hand counting ballots.
Professor.
Yes, thank you, Auditor Treasurer Sukla, for being here and answering our questions. I know in the review process, we hand count 2 random precincts, and then we meet and confirm those. Supposedly, if the hand count shows 0.25% or more of a difference between the machine count, then we need to possibly hand count more precincts to check our system.
That is correct.
Yeah. Has Winona County ever had to hand count more than 2 precincts? Have we ever had deviations between the machine count and the hand count?
We did have a deviation that honestly, when I think back, I should have disagreed with it, but it was still within the minimum. We've never had to exceed the 2 precinct post-election equipment review verification.
Okay, I think that's an attestament to the validity of our system and of our workers. So I appreciate the diligence and the attention that people pay to this. I've also been told that, well, today we heard that hand counts are more, less mistake prone, but I've heard also that they are more mistake prone. And so I've heard discussion on both sides that the machines are more accurate, the machines are less accurate, the hand count is more accurate, the machine count is less accurate. Do we have any resolution of those options or?
There again, I have to go back to, I never comment on people's opinions. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
So those are opinions. Nobody has really researched that.
I did, like I said, sometimes I'm very cautious when I read things on the internet. Sometimes they're swayed. So I guess, like I said, I always like to speak to the fact that I know what we do here in Winona County. I do know that or as I guess I told 2 people I was training yesterday, I can program 100 machines to do the same thing over and over, but I can't make 100 people think the same way. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's your professional opinion, so I appreciate that. And also the cast vote record only captures the votes in the precinct on the day. Is that correct?
No. And here, and I'm sorry if I'm boring you with facts and details, but
We need those.
obviously in the state of Minnesota, we have absentee voting. We also have polling site voting. So we actually, because the office of the auditor treasurer is the absentee voting center, we have thumb drives programmed specifically for absentee voting. And because we have to offer voting to all 49 precincts, our thumb drives are able to take each and every ballot. And just if anybody cares, this election, we have 72 different ballot styles because of the school board races. So when you're uploading those results, common practice is that you upload the absentee thumb drive first. Obviously, because at 8 p.m. when we can close the absentee polls and begin creating those results, we've got the thumb drive in our office. All the other precincts, we have to wait until those folks finish up their duties and transport that information to us.
I think one of the issues I have is that I'm not sure what information is actually captured on this analysis, on this record. And so I would like to see a sample of a cast vote record. They are anonymous, so, I don't think there'd be any problem with that, but haven't quite been able to track one down. I still have concerns about the small precincts and the possibility of matching some kind of personal data or in terms of the voter privilege for right to privacy. So I still have that issue. And I also heard that the access to the voting info, can ensure accuracy. So I'm not sure that those two things actually go together. I mean, obviously access to the records is information, but how that equates to increasing the accuracy of the voting, I don't see a direct connection. But basically, I still need more information, and I think, I don't know if we need to ask the Secretary of State's office or some other entity to fill us in on some of these details. We don't have any experience with this as a county, and so I think I still have questions. So, but thank you very much, and thank you for the training and the handling all the complexities, as well as the issues of statutes and all of that come down on this. I appreciate your work on that.
Commissioner Olson, then Commissioner Ward.
I guess this would be a question for our county attorney. You had mentioned at the last non-discussion that we have no jurisdiction over asking or telling or anything with the election function that the auditor treasurer has. And perhaps this is a conversation that we're just wasting time on if we really have no jurisdiction. And could you repeat that or correct me? Or, I mean, I hear different conflicting things, but you're the authority of the law.
I did state that at the non-discussion at the last meeting. And in the meantime, I've also done more research. My office, I've assigned this to actually three of us to work on. And that research has resulted in verifying what I had stated before, which was based on my preliminary research. And there's a very specific statute. There's definitions of what an election official is. And if you have a county auditor, which we do, that is the election official. And the election official has the authority to make the decisions about election administration. As the county board, you can give your recommendations, you can I think, make a statement, yes, by a resolution that you would like to see the cast ballots or the cast vote record released. I would at that point tell you to be very concerned about doing that without further investigation into that because there is privacy issues with that data. The arguments that I heard this morning from people who want to release it have now kind of pivoted to, well, everything that is on an electronic equipment is subject to cyber attacks. And I would agree with that, but as what was just discussed, there's training and there's procedures that are designed to check the accuracy of those records. And I'm not just saying this as county attorney here. The Winona County Attorneys Association has formed an election law committee. And in fact, we just met yesterday and the concern is statewide about releasing these. And I'm not sure about what happened in Fillmore County. I know there were a couple counties that released the data, but that was based on their auditor treasurer's decision, not the decision of the county board. So if there's an elected auditor treasurer or an appointed election official, that person has the authority under the statute to make decisions as to how election data, such as the cast vote records, are released. So,
Okay, so you just mentioned if this county board made a proclamation saying we want that data released, that's meaningless because ultimately the auditor treasurer has jurisdiction. So they could take that proclamation and ignore it, or they could.
I guess I wouldn't characterize as meaningless. It would be your recommendation, just like any other public. Ms. Sukla's heard various recommendations this morning from lots of different people and lots of different or two different positions, basically. So it would be a statement to her that this is how the board feels. But yes, the board has no decision-making authority. You are not the election official here. And as was pointed out, Ms. Sukla is the elected auditor treasurer, and the Minnesota statutes and the Minnesota rules, which are the administrative rules that also govern election administration, both state that the election official, in this case, the county auditor, makes those decisions.
Just one more follow-up. So the cast vote record indicates there's some question of the data that could be released or identifying information, so that the caution would be to be very careful about releasing it.
Correct, because not just because there are precincts that have small number of voters, but I'll give you an example. One of my colleague in Crow Wing County, the Crow Wing County Attorney, Don Ryan, he's personally looked at the cast, at what the cast records, the whatever numbers are on there. And because smaller jurisdictions, you can literally, kind of see who voted, what they voted for, things like that, where you can potentially identify a voter and who they voted for. And one of the concerns, and it's a legitimate concern, that I think was brought up by one of the speakers here too, but I've heard it elsewhere, is that there is a concern that if that information goes out, also asking for identifying information of election judges, that there are some concerns about people being harassed. And if they're identified, if they can be located, things like that. So
just one more follow-up to Sandra. It's been a while since I've been on the canvassing board, but so we have the tally sheets from whatever township. Number of votes cast, number of votes per candidate. Is that, I'm just trying to remember what's on that little tally sheet that we look at.
Right. So what we are verifying, and the election judges verify prior to bringing it, hard and fast rule you have 50 signatures on your roster, you better only have 50 ballots in your machine. And that's what we verify that during Canvas.
Right.
Total numbers.
Right, but then as we go to the Canvas, that is when we have the abstract and we look to see each and every precinct, how many votes were cast for X candidate. What you do not see on the abstract is how many votes were cast absentee versus polling site. You also do not see what we see in our office when we're doing the testing, or there was some on the abstract, you do not see the overvotes and the undervotes. If you were to take a look at the summary statements, those tapes, those long tapes that come from the machine, those do register overvotes and undervotes. Because in the end, the math has to tie out.
Yeah. I mean, I've
Yeah.
sat on a couple canvassing boards, so
Yeah, I think, yeah, here, I'm sorry, I think what they want to go one level down, they want to audit each and every ballot. Did each and every ballot and the votes cast on that ballot tie out to what those summary statements are saying? That's my opinion. The folks that are requesting these reports.
Commissioner Ward, then Commissioner Jacob.
Yeah, a couple of things. Do you feel, Sandra, Ms. Sukla, do you feel that the turning the on switch and documenting the cast vote record would be another check in the checks and balances of the system? Would it provide a check if needed in the whole system? If we have it or if we don't have it? Your hesitation answers the question.
My
okay?
hesitation, I think I made this comment a few meetings ago about when will the satisfaction be achieved, and I don't think it will be.
All right.
And that's another hesitation of mine because we give the summarization, we test the equipment prior to sending it out. That's the important thing to me. We make sure it works before it ever goes out. By, and we can look at a physical test ballot, compare it to what the tape said.
I think a big question with the public is not within Winona County, but it's when it leaves and goes out into the systems, the cloud, the internet. So personally, just recently being hacked with check accounts and credit cards, it just happens. It's part of everyday life now. People get into your private information and it's unfortunate, but it's something that we've had to deal with and it's not been fun to get that all cleared up. Attorney Sonneman mentioned, the elected versus appointed. And if the board, the question I have, if the board appointed an election, could the board appoint themselves as the election officials? If it's not an elected position, the auditor treasurer is an appointed position, and you say the election official has to be appointed, that wouldn't necessarily be the appointed auditor treasurer. Could the county board appoint themselves as the election officials?
Because I didn't say that the election official has to be appointed. I said in counties where there is an appointed official, like Olmsted, I believe that's not elected anymore. I think it's they've split it into like auditor or property and election official.
Right.
So that would be a position that the board would select, just like you select the assessor or the highway department or highway engineer.
Right.
So I guess conceivably you could appoint yourselves, but I think that would put you in a pretty awkward position of, I wouldn't advise it because the perception would be that you might be trying to, influence the election.
But if could you appoint, and does it have to be a county employee or could it be an independent citizen of the community?
It'd be, if you decide to appoint, and you have to go through a whole process, and You've talked about, Commissioner Ward, I think in the past where you support elected officials, but let me go back to your question. It could be a county employee, it could be where you solicit applications for that position. So, yeah.
All right, so
Mhm.
there's options there.
Yeah.
Ms. Zuka, do you know, has the Secretary of State ever requested from counties the cast vote record?
No.
No, that Secretary of State doesn't require these or hasn't solicited these. And is that because they find no value in them, or do you know, is there a why?
I do not know.
Okay.
No, I don't have that answer.
Okay. Okay, I think that answers what I had down. Thank you.
Mr. Jacob.
So your initial question right off the bat, Commissioner Ward, was, is the system fully activated? Do you intend to fully activate the system for this election? I really didn't hear a crystal clear answer.
Okay. The public asked me that too. I told them I actually had to set up the November election in August. So it's done. There is no such thing as quick turnaround on an election. The key here is, yes, I've pulled the system to capture the write-ins, but then there's a second key thing. When we're uploading the results, we have to archive them. So I will probably archive them just so that I have that experience of dealing with these records.
Does the word archive them, is that synonymous with the vote cast record system is activated and on?
I think I can say with certainty, yes, the ability to create the report has been turned on.
Okay, I had numerous constituents tell me that they ask you specifically and you told them that it's on, it'll be on.
Yeah. Well, there again, like I said, I had to go back into my initial setup. Does it actually tell me, create cast vote record? No, it doesn't. It talks about capturing write-in images. And sorry for being such a purist, but it's like, it's not the same. If it doesn't match, I'm like, okay, I have to do more research.
I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall trying to figure out a simple yes or no.
Yes, it is activated.
It's activated, it's on.
Yes.
And it's doing what the citizens are asking, that the citizens that have been coming to the podium asking to have the system on and activated, that's happening this election.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. But as a, I guess, very clear signal to the community that the auditor treasurer is doing that, I'm going to also make the motion that this board recommends to our auditor treasurer that the VCR system is fully activated for the upcoming November 8th election. And that's a motion.
I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, so I'm not sure that Commissioner Jacobs ready to give up the floor yet.
Yes, that's fine.
Yep. Okay, so Commissioner Ward, then Commissioner Kavesi.
Okay. A question. So if it's turned on and a report is available, and for the privacy concerns, it's not automatically released. This data would have to come through a data request action, which we have a process for. And seriously, all our governmental information, other than very limited, is public record, correct?
Unless there's an exception, yes, all data under the Minnesota Data Practices Act is public.
So it wouldn't be automatically released. Somebody would have to request it through our system of getting the information and such. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Kavesi, then Commissioner Olson.
I just have a question about the motion. Ms. Sukla has just verified that the system is on for the next election. And so the recommendation requests her to turn it on, I'm not sure we need that recommendation. But I do have a question. When you say turned on, is that for all votes or for the write-ins?
Well, there again, from the training I viewed, my belief is a cast vote record can be generated regardless if you're only capturing write-ins or all. So until I can prove it to myself, it's going to work. I will give you a tentative yes.
And this is just how convoluted this has become is I had asked Ms. Dukla if she could have done this cast vote record in the 2020 election. And she told me no, because the software wasn't upgraded. So the very software upgrade that she came to this board to ask to receive the grant to pay for that, Commissioner Jacob voted against because he thought we should hand count the ballots. So now, thankfully, we upgraded the software and we can produce this. So the other question would be, it's on, but doesn't the statute leave it to the auditor treasurer discretion to release it?
That's correct, yeah, so.
Okay,
Are you done?
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Ward.
Yes, Commissioner Olson, we did approve software and we've always approved this, but it has been pointed out that although the county board can't say to turn it on or off, the county board is the funding mechanism for all this moving forward. So the county board can have some say in how we run elections in the future, if we want to continue using these systems or not. So I mean, just to know that the county board does have a role to play in this. We're not totally immune from elections. We do have a role to play in them. And but the second part, the auditor treasurer office would have to release these through data practices and requests. It still could be have to be released because it's public data.
The public can make requests, and in fact, they have through our data practices, our Gov QA program, which is a software program that makes it easier for people to make those requests. But then those requests have to be reviewed, and they have been reviewed. And as Commissioner Olson asked me, the statute is, again, quite clear that if we're talking about the CVR data or any really election data, again, that is in the discretion of Ms. Dukla as the election official. And I can read per the statute that the CVR can be produced and released, so that's the release part, if deemed advisable by the auditor, and two, used to evaluate the performance of the electronic voting system or used to evaluate other aspects of the election. The decision whether or not to turn on the CVR feature, which Ms. Zuko's already indicated she has, I think by virtue that she has the write-in on, and she had said previously that that makes it available for all of the CVR, right? Is that kind of what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. But so the decision to turn that on and whether to release that information is within the sole discretion of the auditor treasurer. So if that came in as a request, which again, some of them have, we would have to inquire of the auditor treasurer. But then there's still separate issues that I would advise the auditor treasurer, anybody who would be considering releasing that information in terms of privacy issues. So not everything is releasable. As you asked me, Commissioner Ward, yes, the statute says all information is public except, and then, as you know, the law has lots of exceptions.
And we let the courts decide those
And
things.
that is correct. And there are a few cases that have started up already. So not here, but in other parts of the state.
Country.
Well, actually in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, Ms. Sukla, you just said that you intend to capture the data and then in your department, you will review it to make some decisions or some conclusions about the use of that data? Is that your intention at this point?
I have to test the capability.
Okay. Thank you.
There's further discussion. Otherwise, I do have a couple questions. As the chair, I tend to go last. So I wanted to clarify with County Attorney Sonneman. What I think I heard is that if we have an appointed auditor treasurer, it makes no difference. The authority still lies with that office.
That's correct.
By
It's
changing to an
defined by-
appointment,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm
it doesn't
sorry.
give us any more authority over the auditor
It's
treasurer.
defined by who is the election official.
Yep,
Correct.
okay, so that office, regardless of whether appointed or elected, has that authority.
Yes.
All right, so the second thing, Ms. Uchula, is we send a set of papers to the Secretary of State's office electronically. And there was some question about whether that gets hacked, but the thing is, it's a finite set of numbers, right? So we confirm afterwards that what is appearing on the Secretary of State's website or in those records actually matches what we sent them. Is that not right?
That is part of the review we complete when we're preparing the abstract, that what we had reported to us on each summary tape that came from the machines tied out to what eventually ended up on the Secretary of State's website. Because the Secretary of State's website, the reporting mechanism for that is something that we call ACE County. That is our reporting mechanism. That's how that's the mechanism for creating the abstract as well as reporting to the Secretary of State's website. So the data should be identical. If it's not, then we need to start looking and researching and determining what may have gone wrong.
But there is a check in place for
Yes.
this. Yeah, thank you. And I think that I just want to make this plain. So I understand that you are testing what the available options are, and that it's your understanding by turning on the functionality that looks at write-in, that indicates that the cast vote record functionality is turned on. But whatever decision, that decision was made 2 months ago. And there would not be time between now and the 8th of November to do something different.
Yeah, I am very nervous. Like I said, I wish we had our testing done already. I realize we have a few weeks left, but you heard me talk about my shortage of staff as well. So even finding individuals to be able to help us, because the test deck, I think it's 38 ballots per ballot style. So multiply 38 times 72, and then you multiply that by 2 because every ballot has to go through the absentee thumb drive as well as the precinct-specific thumb drive. So yeah, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Plus testing the upload so that we don't have any blips on election night. Yep.
Because of the information that the auditor treasurer has given us about what's turned on and what can be turned on between now and the election, and because it is ultimately her authority, I'm not going to support this motion. Now, we did have someone that gave public testimony today that talked about how the board had the authority because we could ultimately cut funding for elections to demand that they be done a different way, which I am certainly not going to do at this point in time. Is there further discussion?
Just a comment. I do appreciate Ms. Sukla's diligence in working with this and everything. And I think elections are very, very important and that this is an issue. It's not just, I really don't feel people are feeling Winona County's doing anything, wrong or the office is doing anything, but it's a bigger issue. It's a national issue and such. And so we have people that are watching the national whole system. I think Minnesota has a much better system than some states do. And I appreciate all your work, but I think this motion just says that we support and we're giving Ms. Sukla support to have this function on, which a lot of people are asking for. And I feel it's another potential check in the checks and balances of our election system. So I do support the motion.
Commissioner Olson and then Commissioner Kavesi.
I'm not going to support the motion simply because Ms. Sukla has already said it's on. So all we're doing is asking her to put it on, and she's already said it's on. That'd be like saying, if you're going to have lunch, we're going to ask you to have lunch. It's redundant, and I don't think that this is a national issue. I think it's a national non-issue. So that's my statement.
Commissioner Kvesi and then Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the motion. One of my original questions was, why do we have this motion when Ms. Sukla just stated that the system is on and we're recommending that she turn it on? It seems a non-issue. The national issues, as I've seen resolution and through the checks and balance systems that we have, through the court challenges, they have all been found to be a non-issue. So I just think we have a good system in Winona County and in Minnesota, and I appreciate the work and the efforts that have gone into providing that for our voters. And I would protect the privacy of the voters, which I believe the cast vote record infringes on. So I'm not in favor of the motion.
Commissioner Ward.
If we look at the top of any of our board packets, it has 20, of course, it's 2019 county board goals, but broad public participation. We've heard about this issue, and part of why we're taking this action today is because of our system of putting things on the agenda. If we would have done this back, before, it probably would have been done. So Commissioner Olson's comment that it's after the fact. Yes, it is after the fact, but I think it's still an important to let the people know that we as a board are hearing them. They're asking us for something. And we've heard both sides. There's both sides. There's more than two sides to any story, but we've heard from a segment of the people, and we're asking for broad public participation. So we've heard from them. And in our core values, accountability. This falls to me in the category of accountability, that it's just another check that is there if needed, not to say that it's needed, but if it is needed, and it just gives documentation. As I said, when we first brought it up, it is an accountability. It is accountable document. So I don't know why we wouldn't want to have that if it's available, why we wouldn't have it. And it sounds like it's already there, which I appreciate that it is there. Thank you.
Jacob.
I've run 3 campaigns for county board, and in that I've used the terms truth, transparency, and accountability. And the intent of this motion was for the public to see very clearly which commissioners stand on which side of the issue. I'm very proud that I made the motion. I'm going to vote for the motion. This is a transparency issue, and I'll support the motion I'll vote for the motion that I made. Of course.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none. The motion as made was made by Commissioner Jacob and seconded by Commissioner Ward, and it was to recommend to the auditor treasurer that the cast vote record be fully activated
For the November 8th election.
for November 8th. Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I state that again.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All those in favor of the motion as made by Commissioner Jacob to recommend turning on the cast vote record to make it fully activated for the November 8th election, signify by saying aye. Yes.
Could I just, because that wasn't the motion, the way I understand it. The motion
okay.
was to ask the auditor treasurer to turn it on. The auditor treasurer has said it was on. So that's the reason I'm voting the way I'm voting. So.
Okay. All right. So can we just start over then? Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how the meeting minutes reflect that
Yeah.
discussion. Of course, we don't reflect discussion.
Rewind.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look back over
Okay.
your
Yeah,
process now. We had a motion and a vote.
we did. Well, we didn't finish the
We
vote.
didn't
though.
finish the vote. We had 3 ayes.
We'll have to look at the cast vote record.
Yeah.
Who's the parliamentarian?
So reconsider the vote a second is required. It is debatable. It isn't amendable, and it requires a majority. So I think if Commissioner Olson wanted to withdraw his vote, you would need to make a motion to reconsider the vote.
Point of order. I think you need to finish the vote
Yep.
before he can do that.
Yep, I agree with you, sir. Okay, so,
Can you repeat the motion?
yeah, I can.
Just for clarity and
So
transparency.
the motion is made by Commissioner Jacob and seconded by Commissioner Ward, is a recommendation that the auditor treasurer make sure that the cast vote record is fully activated for the November 8th election.
Okay.
All those, we already asked for the votes in favor, and there were 3. Those signify against the motion signify by saying nay. Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
You can't vote twice.
Where does it say that? I tried to correct my
You
first
can't
vote.
vote twice. I mean,
Yeah.
you indicated,
I indicated that I
Yeah.
said I mistake.
Right.
That's what I indicated.
but it's on the record and so.
But it is on the record. So in that case, the motion has passed. But if you wished at this time, I think you could make a motion to reconsider.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn after we get done with county board stuff.
Okay,
Okay,
so
all right.
motion passes. I think that's that. So we are now on to the post agenda business. Commissioner Ward, you
Yes.
had a future board action potentially?
A future board action is that we look at the makeup of our citizen volunteer committees to possibly put spots on those committees, specific spots on those committees for subject matter expertise.
Well, I'll second, I'll second it.
Yeah, in
second
particular
it,
with
yeah.
the discussion with Karen Sanis in the public health. Thank you.
Commissioner Kvesi, you had an announcement and a committee report.
Yeah, I have several announcements, so hang on. The committee report, the WinLAC, One Watershed, One Planning, both the Technical Assistance Committee and the Planning and the Policy Committee met a week ago. And we do now have a draft plan that is out for public review for 60 days. So at that time, the Policy Committee will review the comments at our next meeting in December. We're not meeting in November. And so the plan is in motion, basically, is what's happening. So if you want to peek at the first draft of the WinLAC plan, it's on the county website. And thank you to Sheila Harms for making that available to the public. I have a thank you to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. There is a work group that is addressing access to health and human services. This work group came about because of a systems process of review, that this was an area of sticking points of how people access our human services. I'm pleased to say this group has been working very hard. It's chaired by Andy Krantz, who's on our Health and Human Services Advisory Committee, and by Chris Meyer. They now have worked to compile websites. They've tested them both from the Department of Health and Winona County website, which do have access programs on them. So they've tested those for what kind of information is there? Is it complete? Is it, easy to get on the system? And we will have some further information on that as soon as the minutes come out from the last meeting. But I appreciate the work of the committee, the work group, and also Naomi Morris and Karen Sanis with the Human Services Department. The model legislature is November 17th and 18th at the Education Village. This is a program bringing together university students and high school students across the region, the southern region. So thank you to the students, the university people who participate, and to Representative Pulowski, who organizes the program. Advocacy Center of Winona is holding a landlords forum on, we know that stable housing is a cornerstone of the social determinants of health. And so any efforts that we have locally to increase the access to housing for all is really important and helpful. So I appreciate that this group is working together and working locally. The meeting is tomorrow at Sobieski Park at noon. That's on the far east side of town. They have a meeting room facility and a lovely a lovely facility on the east side. Project Fine yesterday had the first welcoming dinner, which was actually a lunch. And we celebrated with Vindaloo, Indian food. And it welcomes new families and citizens to our area. And I do appreciate the work that goes into that. Those are very important meetings to have in our community. And last but not least, the League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan organization, is holding a series of election forums. One is tonight. And that's a really effective way for the general public, for anyone to tune in. It will be held at City Hall starting at 6 o'clock. And it includes local officials, school board officials, or candidates, actually, local candidates, school board candidates, state candidates, and they all come together to answer a series of questions which come from the public. So it's a very open process and a very good way to see where your candidates stand on some of the issues. So thank you for this opportunity to review those.
So I had a potential board action. I would like to know if the board would be interested in considering a letter of invitation, a non-antagonistic letter of invitation to the City of Winona staff and officials, inviting them to have a conversation about the potential of staying at the LEC and what that would require. For the Winona PD to stay at the LEC and what that would require.
I would second that.
Thanks. I think that concludes our business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Olson has moved and Jacob has seconded adjournment. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay,
Yeah,
I just want to throw that in.
okay, go for it.
We already got Ms. Holte working on that though.